This is a series of clips taken from more than 10 hours of amateur home movies, starting in 1946. It was prepared for inclusion on a Kickstarter project, but if you're viewing it on YouTube or some other site, you can purchase and download MP4s of all 10 hours of this interesting legacy footage simply by using the links in the description. Thank you. Eyewitness background on the 1946 films. The cameraman, my father, Robert Herman Jansen, was born backstage and joined his parents' vaudeville act as soon as he could walk. Grandpa, Anthony Robert Jansen, was a baggy pants comic, as it was called, and his mother, Irene Morrow Jansen, was an Irish immigrant who was a singer. Unfortunately, his childhood career ended when she died in the flu epidemic of 1920. After high school, in the 1930s, my dad worked as a nightclub song and dance man, stage name Bob Roberts. Later, he became what was called an announcer at a small radio station in Milwaukee. When he married a beautician named Evelyn Whitish in 1938, his show business experience helped him selling residential real estate. He liked to give what he called inspirational public speeches, which were little more than stand-up comedy routines from his nightclub days. He played the banjo, mandolin, violin, and viola, none of them very well, and even tried his hand at repairing violins in the back room of his real estate office. Like most of the people in the home movies, my parents are dead, as are all the grandparents, endless aunts and uncles, and even my own reckless older brother, Dennis, who died in 2009. Two of the little girls in the films, my sisters Kathleen and Marion, are still alive, grandparents themselves today. My post-war extended family was the result of three large Midwestern families merging: the Jansens, the Whitishes, and my step-grandmother's family, the Gusts, which spawned 13 nuclear families with dozens and dozens of cousins. The baby boom, the so-called baby boom, was created when all the soldiers who fought World War II came home and made babies. So many GIs made babies in Japan or occupied Europe that President Harry Truman joked that in the next war, America would only have to send uniforms overseas. Yes, Truman, and there was FDR before him. I've lived through 15 presidents, and I may see one or two more if I live as long as my father. He was 92, I believe. There is a youthful vibrancy in America clearly visible in these films, a strength and naive integrity that seems to have been lost despite the increases in technology. It seems strange to call films of myself historic, but it was an almost unrecognizable world 78 years ago. In 1946, $1 bought 16 times as much as in 2024, but there was less to buy. No Walmarts, no cheap Chinese imports, no Japanese cars. Payphones cost a nickel, as did a 6-ounce ice-cold bottle of Coca-Cola. Everybody smoked cigarettes everywhere. A pack of Lucky Strikes or Chesterfields could be purchased from vending machines for a quarter, which we kids had to do if we didn't look old enough to buy whole cartons in stores. Gasoline was 20 cents a gallon, with a free 6-pack of Coke for filling the tank, and uniformed attendants washed all your windows, checked your oil, and put air in your tires while your tank was filling. Adding machines and typewriters were manual, and you cranked the mimeograph by hand. There were no personal computers, laptops, tablets, or iPhones. No transistors even for radios or amplifiers. They were all tube. No lasers, no LEDs, no compact fluorescents, no lithium or even yet alkaline batteries, all lead acid batteries, no Wi-Fi or infrared remote control devices, no videotape, no digital cameras, no stereo sound, no rock and roll, and no internet, of course. Large sets of hardcover books called encyclopedias had information just about every topic, and people either accessed them at the library or at home if they could afford to own a personal set. There was a specialized set for children called Childcraft, which my grandmother, used to read to us kids before we could read them ourselves. Being what are now called early adapters, we got our first black and white 12-inch Emerson television set in 1949 before most of our neighbors. I was only 7, but I still vividly remember helping my father set up the antenna and run the strange flat 300-ohm wire down to the living room below. Very little television programming at first, live puppet shows like Howdy Doody and Kukla, Fran and Ollie, and one old Hollywood movie usually, often Hopalong Cassidy, on Saturday night, sponsored by Schlitz Beer. The 3 major networks transitioned from radio, had half-hour news shows at 6 p.m., but for several years we still relied on our 2 local daily newspapers and monthly periodicals like Look, Life, Collier's, and the Reader's Digest. My brother and I visited the Wauwatosa Public Library, which was housed in a large old mansion, at least once a week on our bikes. The baskets held 3 books nicely. Animal stories like the Black Stallion series and the Lassie series, all of Jules Verne, and classics like The Three Musketeers or all the Charles Dickens stuff. We had AM radio, which had dramatic programs like Gunsmoke, Tarzan, or X-1. And we had 78 RPM records, which had oftentimes movies had been cut down from radio programs, put on 78 RPM records. And of course our own home movies. Freeways in Milwaukee were not built until the 60s, so to see a new Hollywood movie, we had to make rapid transit streetcar journey to downtown Milwaukee from the suburb where we lived. In 1952, my brother and I went, for example, with Grandpa Whitish to see a movie called Buona Devil in 3D, where the natives threw spears and the audience ducked. More often, the entire family would pile into the car and drive 10 miles out to the Blue Mound Drive-In Theater, which we did even in cold weather because they had electric heaters you could put into your car window along with the speaker. Drive-ins, despite their sexy reputation, were actually created for typical baby boomer families like ours, 2 toddlers and an infant on a bottle. My mother made Kool-Aid and a whole dishpan of popcorn, and we carried a repurposed Skippy peanut butter jar to pee in so we kids wouldn't have to risk polio by going out to the public toilet or to the swing sets under the big screen. The Salk vaccine did not arrive until 1955. Christmas or Thanksgiving at Grandpa's farmhouse, big white farmhouse, was usually 5 or 6 related couples, often brothers and sisters, with maybe 3 kids per couple. Just seating these family gatherings took a huge kitchen table, the bench from the player piano in the parlor, a card table, and the strenuous efforts of most of the womenfolk working over Grandma's wood-burning kitchen stove and hand-pump sink. My father was the only man working white-collar of the whole bunch, and he was doing very well selling houses and life insurance. Government-backed 30-year mortgages for returning soldiers required no down payment and were around 3% interest. A nice new ranch-style house on a quarter-acre lot cost all of $25,000. Although he claimed he was valedictorian of his high school class, my father did not have a proper college degree. Indeed, there were no professionals anywhere in our extended family. No doctors, no dentists, no professors, no lawyers, no one with even a bachelor's degree. My father's younger brother, Daniel Jansen, for example, who had been a Marine in Roosevelt's honor guard, worked post-war as a jeweler repairing mechanical watches, and eventually became a Boy Scout executive. My mother's father, Grandpa Ed Whitish, born in 1885, who was handy with tools and machinery, had only a third-grade education, which was not that unusual before 1900. In 1955, when I was 13, Grandpa could still proudly recite the names of all the states and their capitals to show off his education. This wiry little man could build barns, weld metals, cut down trees, and plow with horses, and I learned a lot from watching him work. But like anyone born in 1885, he lived in a horse-drawn, quaint, patriotic America, full of recently arrived European immigrants. In about 1955, he asked me if I thought the moon was really on fire, like they say. I was already reading hard science fiction by that time and didn't know what to say. Not just trauma, literally everything that happens to young children has consequences. Like chaotic systems, humans are sensitive to initial conditions. As a psychologist, I found myself noticing precursors of later traits or behaviors in the young children in the films. It's like having a longitudinal study or a time machine. For example, in one 1946 film, my brother Dennis and I are riding our trikes down a sidewalk hill. I'm slowing the trike down by keeping my feet on the pedals, but Dennis holds his legs out and lets his pedals run free, and this, of course, triples his speed. Dennis is only 6 at the time, but already he was a reckless driver, later crashing and destroying several automobiles in his 20s. In his 60s, he was seriously injured in a bicycle accident, a smashed shoulder and spine that eventually led to his early demise. Amazingly, this can be predicted by watching this film clip of him when he was 6, already underestimating speed danger because he had no depth perception because of his strabismus and extreme myopia. Jansen kids did not sass their parents when I was a boy. Sassing was answering them with disrespect, and if you did cross that line, you could not admit it, or you risked a beating. "Are you sassing me?" parents would demand, and the kid always said no, because if you are, I'll get the whip, and then you better run. Yes, my shy and gentle mama had a real whip. Dad nailed leather strips to a foot of wood dowel and hung it conspicuously in the kitchen broom closet, where Mama could easily get at it. He never used it himself or even slapped us, and I can't remember Mama ever actually hitting a kid with the whip. When she lost patience with us, it was enough to just move toward the broom closet looking murderous. We were often told to go outside and play, and we knew how to play with nothing in those days. Tag, hide and seek, cowboys and Indians, statue maker, Captain May I, ring around the rosy, all games without props. My brother liked to wrestle with me on the backyard lawn. Being 2 years older and a foot taller, Dennis always won these contests, and these certain victories may have conditioned him to be more aggressive in later contexts. I think being the perennial loser had the opposite effect on me. I often distracted my brother from wrestling by telling him adventure stories which I made up on the spot. I don't think he ever realized what I was doing. Pom-pom, pull away, let your horses run away was a favorite at recess in grade school. Kids ran across the playground and got caught or escaped the single guy who was it. He exponentially built a team of the caught kids, and the last kid caught became the starter it in the next game. We did not realize how much this game and all the games we played modeled and perhaps predicted human social behavior.